Hello, everybody. This is Tim Martin with Covenant Creation on YouTube. I have a very special guest today. I have Travis Drum from Arkansas. He's going to be joining with us and talking about some things this evening that we've enjoyed our company about. And how are you doing, Travis?
I'm great, Tim. You know, I was just sharing with you that unfortunately I woke up this morning a little stuffy. So, you know, my typical Southern twang might be a little diminished, might be a little off tonight, but nonetheless, we're going to get through it. I'm doing great, man. It's a pleasure to be on here. I mean, it's an honor, honestly. And I just thank you for the opportunity, Tim. Been looking forward to it. So,
well, I've been thinking about, talking with people on the station, on the channel here with the YouTube stuff. And I have to start off by saying it's all your fault, because you were the very first one to, last year, but well, it was more than a year ago now, but it was like last October or November. You were talking about your YouTube channel, and then all of a sudden you said, well, you should get a YouTube channel and put up some of your stuff. And I had never had the idea in my mind ever of actually developing a YouTube channel, because it's like, whatever. I like writing and stuff, but YouTube's,
well, I guess that was kind of selfish on my part, because I have a job that allows me a lot of road time, right? So I can't read a lot, but I can listen a lot. Right. And so, you would occasionally send me an article on this and that or whatever. And I'm like, man, it'd just be a lot easier if I could just click play and listen to this. So, you did me a solid anyway. So I appreciate that, Tim.
Well, I'm jealous of your channel, because I just checked it today, and you've got over 1,000 subscribers, and I think I'm less than half of your subscribers. But yeah,
I don't know. I can't explain it. There's been 2 times where I've had just a really weird run, where I picked up a lot, and other than that, it's like, very slow. It's a very slow trickle. So right. Whatever. Which there was a time too I was putting out a lot more than I currently am. It's just
right.
Since we had the 3rd baby, and just life is a whirlwind right now. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that like I was doing a year ago.
Right.
But maybe one day,
Well, your video, Why Preterism, was really helpful to me. And I thought it was a good introductory explanation of preterism. So I put it on my website on the front page. So people that come to my website are probably going to be, linking that up if they're coming at it from a futures perspective, asking questions about preterism. So that was really cool to have, very, very basic introductory type videos for that.
Well, I appreciate that. That's actually to date, that is my most watched video. Oh. Last time I looked at it, it had around 9,000 views or something, which I think is just crazy.
It's when you suggested you should make a YouTube channel, I went and I watched 3 days worth of how to make YouTube channels on YouTube.
Yeah, you don't do anything halfway, do you?
My wife she just shook her head. She knew exactly what was going on. She just, whatever. So, but that was what I came away with. The whole idea was content, quality content is really what rules YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I've seen, that's really been my focus. And I've seen people put out great stuff like your Why Preterism videos and your other stuff. And it's like that stuff just keeps on generating views, because, you've got a niche there, and it really helps people, and then they share it, and then it goes from there.
Well, what I wanted to do, even when I started, was do, for the most part, shorter drive time, that 20 to 30 minute type teaching stuff, maybe over one topic, just very simple and specific, to give people a targeted resource. If I have a video on Acts 1:11, and just, I have a video on the rapture, just things like that. Like, hey, I'm curious about this, and here's, 20, 30. Now, obviously they don't always land that short, because I'm a talker, but nonetheless, that was the goal anyway. And, I enjoyed doing it. It's again, I just don't have the time right now.
Right.
But the people in the preterist world, by and large, not all of them, but by and large, have been very supportive too. Right. And that helps. I had a guy telling me the other day, he's like, man, I started your 1 Timothy series and then realized there's only like 5 videos. Like, what are you waiting on? I was like, man, I had made one of them in like 8 months. But, he's like, well, I enjoy it. You need to make some more.
Right. Right. Well, how many children do you have?
I've got 3. So okay. My oldest is 6, my girl is 3, and then my son is 8 months old.
Right.
Youngest son.
I understand you getting pulled a lot of different ways with responsibilities, and and just demands on your time. That makes a lot of sense. I remember those days. I mean,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's great. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is I wanted to, talk to you about kind of your background with preterism and your congregational life there in Arkansas. And I know you had a conference this year. Everybody probably has heard of the Arkansas Eschatology Conference. How did that go? And do you guys have plans for maybe in the future putting that together again?
So it went great. Just real briefly, Zach and I decided, I guess it would have been late 2023 that we kind of wanted to do that. We'd been to, or we're getting ready to go to Virginia, and to Berean conference. And so we were just talking amongst ourselves like, hey, it'd be cool to do something here. Arkansas is kind of a central location, as opposed to some of the coasts and so forth. And anyway, I went and had a meeting with a couple facilities, and one thing led to another, and we're off to the races. And, initially we're like praying that we would get 100 people. Like that was the goal. If we could land that 100 to 120, and it was a very slow trickle. I mean, very slow. We came out of the gate and sold 10 or 20, and then it was like 2 a week, 3 a week. And after Berean conference, like really gearing into the summer, the bottom fell out, and we actually sold it out. We had the capacity at 250, I think, or 225, and we sold it out, and we were just mind blown. So we go to the facility and have a conversation. They add more chairs. We added, 50 more tickets or so, sold it out again. So we wound up running right at 300, maybe 290 that came to this thing. And, for our first time, would we have done some things different? Minor things, yes, 100%. But overall, we feel like it went really well. We got a lot of really good feedback. There was some very constructive, negative feedback that, honestly, we agreed with all of. But for the most part, I think it was a good, memorable experience. Now, you asked if there was another one in the works. Not for 2025. I'm sorry. Love to do it, but maybe we'll look into 2026, try and set something up.
Right. Well, it's a big undertaking. We've done conferences here in Montana before with a congregation that I was associated with for many years, and it takes it out of you. It's a big project, and a lot of time and effort and money goes into doing those. The good thing is you have the recordings, and I've listened to all the recordings you guys put out, and that was really a blessing. So I thank you guys for the work on that, because I know it's a lot of work. So, but anyway, let me announce here too, and I've made the announcement elsewhere, is that we do have a 2025 Montana conference up here in Whitehall, Montana. In fact, Pastor Zach Davis is one of our confirmed speakers right now. So let everybody know that we are making plans for that. We are selling tickets already, because I've basically said you probably need to start at early planning, because it's kind of a vacation type of conference, a little different than what most preterist conferences have been for as far as weekends. So we're going to do it during the week and make it a longer event with just evening sessions, and then days free for exploring Montana, sightseeing, going to see towns, just enjoying each other's company, having like a festival type atmosphere there on site. So that's our plan.
I really like that too. I think that's an interesting idea. And something that we both here in Virginia and heard at our conference was how much the people like the fellowship.
Right.
Because as well as I do, a lot of preterists feel like they live on an island. They can't convene with a local church. They don't have anybody to talk to. And so at a conference, you're around people that don't look at you like you're a three-headed alien, and it's just a joyous time, right? And so I think what you're going to do there is going to be special.
It's an experiment. I've been around conferences for 25 years, 30 years, going back to Reformed theology conferences and, presuppositional apologetics conferences and stuff like that. And I've never seen one done like this. And it's kind of intimidating, because when you do it during the week, it cuts out, certain people from being able to come for work and stuff. But the idea is that if you're going to plan a vacation for 2025, we're asking preterists to consider do a Montana vacation in conjunction with the conference. Maybe come a couple days early, maybe come a couple days, stay a couple days later, and have more time to enjoy the family vacation type thing. But and then we'll have the conference.
It's a 2-in-1 essentially.
It's going to be expensive because we are in a high tourism area. So, it does, as far as, accommodations and things like that, it's probably higher than a typical location for a conference, but we're trying to make the most out of what we have. So our venue is a wedding event center, which actually having it during the week for them, they're like, yeah, we'd love to have a conference. Sell the thing during the week when you don't have a wedding. So that was super nice. And then on the conference grounds, they have a huge lawn where they have the outdoor wedding ceremonies and stuff. And that is open for camping or RV parking right there on site for the 4 days of the conference. We start on Tuesday, July 22nd. We go through Friday, July 25th. We'll have to be out of there, Friday evening or whatever. But if you wanted to just bring a tent and camp, yourself, a friend, family, whatever, or if you drive RVs for your vacations, you can pull in and park or camp right on site. And that cuts out all the expenses of hotels, and those kind of things. If you're up for that kind of stuff, we do have hotels in the area. We have a lot of Airbnb options, fishing cabins, it's just a tourist area, but they tend to sell out, get booked up, starting first of the year. And then it gets really busy by, February, March. All the people that, want to come to Montana, they've got their stuff booked. So I try to tell people, if you're going to think about this, probably start thinking about it soon and making some plans.
Well, and I think that's smart. And there's an advantage to that too, obviously, which you're aware of. So,
right.
How's the reception been so far?
We've sold a number of tickets so far. We have a capacity of 275 with our venue. So we have a good capacity. I don't know, like you guys starting out with Arkansas, I have no idea who's going to show up, but we're going to have an evening meal, like afternoon, evening meal every day. And there's only going to be one meal involved because the days are going to be free and people are just going to go.
Right.
When they wake up or whatever, they want to go see stuff, they're just going to go. So they're free all day long to go explore our rivers, explore our mountains, explore our tourist places like Bozeman, Montana. Butte, Montana has a lot of sightseeing type stuff and just, it's beautiful. It's just the scene, and the wedding venue is kind of perched up into the mountains about 6 miles out of town. So it's a very aesthetically pleasing place right on the river. So we can have all kinds of stuff going on there, but we can actually have festival type. We can set up cooking stuff there. There's restrooms inside the venue that we can use. There's a kitchen inside the venue that we can use if we need to for daytime stuff. So it's totally flexible. But we'll start with a meal about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we'll go straight into worship time and praise, worship, and prayer time. And then we'll go with 3 sessions per evening with a question and answer period afterward. So that's our plan for 4 days. That's just the routine we're going to do. And Montana, that time of year, it doesn't really get dark around here till about 10:30 at night anyway. Nobody goes to bed early anyway. So I anticipate it's going to be midnight or after midnight before things get, calmed down and the fellowship and stuff. But we'll see how it all shakes out. And if it is successful, I do kind of envision this as being potentially, an annual event that, people could just plan on, sort of like the Preterism Pilgrim weekends at Ardmore used to be like with Don Preston. We're kind of modeling it off of that idea with a different context.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, and I know we're early in the game, but is this a one and done or plans to continue to do it? So that's good to know.
It'll depend on how everything goes, but we are just an automatic tourist destination. So there's a lot of amenities here for that time of year. I mean, everybody comes to Montana in the summertime, and they run away for the winter. Well, there's some winter sports and stuff, but it's the summertime that is our big tourist season. So we are set up for it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
My problem is if I came out there, you'd probably have to just make room for me in your cabin because I wouldn't leave. Every time you send me a video or something, it's just so beautiful out there, man. I'm like, that's crazy.
Well, it has been discovered. People have been moving here for a long time. There were a couple of big movies that kicked everything off. There was a movie called A River Runs Through It in the early 90s, Robert Redford movie. And Brad Pitt was in it. And it's a fishing movie. And, they actually filmed that right here in this area, part of it. And then the rest of it was filmed over in Missoula. But that movie got the first influx of people moving to Montana, just getting out of the city, going to move to Montana. And Brad Pitt was in it, but they didn't have one winter scene in the whole movie. It was all summertime. I mean, there's like 4th of July parties, there's fishing all summer long, and not one winter scene. And I you look at that, you're like, that's false advertising.
Yeah, they tricked everybody, didn't they?
Oh, totally. But of course, once people get here, it's like, okay, we'll deal with the winter. We'll go snowboarding or skiing or something like that.
Didn't you tell me that you bring in a semi-load of wood and have like 2 or 3 fireplaces, or did I make that up?
No, we live off wood heat. Yeah, here in Montana, and the cabin here is my older kids live here in the cabin. We eat meals at the house, but our house isn't really big enough for 9 children. Well, down to 4.5 now. We're at the halfway point. We're at the perfect halfway point.
There you go.
But yeah, we burn firewood all winter long. A semi-load of firewood will last us probably like 4 years, 3-4 years.
Okay.
But yeah, it's all wood heat. So get up in the morning, it's chilly. Wake up. Who's going to get first?
Fire, huh? That's cool. Very cool.
It's a different lifestyle. We work all summer, so we're not around a lot in the summertime between the farm responsibilities and the seasonal work with the window cleaning. But yeah, it's busy.
That's interesting.
But anyway, yeah, Montana is open. It's an open invite for Montana to come out here and do our conference on our website, beyondcreationscience.com. I've got all of the information there, but we have confirmed Don Preston to speak. We've confirmed my co-author, Jeff Vaughn, to come out from California and speak. And then we'll have Zach Davis, Pastor Zach Davis. And then we'll have, Rick Welch from the Burros of Berea is planning on being here. He was actually here last summer scoping it out and seeing if it was, kind of a reasonable idea. And he loved it. And this whole conference is really kind of Steve Magua's, we're in a partnership with Steve Magua because this will be the 3rd annual Ask the Pastor conference. We're just moving it from St. Louis to Montana. And then myself, I'll be speaking as well. So that's 6 speakers and 12 sessions over the 4 days. So we each get 2. So it'll be good.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to it.
I've never met Steve, but he seems like a cool guy.
He is energetic. Yeah. He and I would click. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun working with Steve, and he gave me the invite at their first Ask the Pastor conference in 2023, and we've just worked really well together in lots of different ways, and we complement each other a lot. So it's beautiful. It's a good working partnership for sure.
Yeah, what we've got to do with Steve though is figure out how to make his 2.5-hour videos into like 30-minute videos. I can't hang with him, man. I don't have the endurance.
Well, that is an issue, but I'm out washing windows and I can be on a job for like 4 or 5 hours or longer. And it's nice for me because I can just put it in and just go and I don't have to think about my work. So it's like the longer he goes, if he's, dealing with great stuff, I'm learning like constantly. So
you're just in the zone.
Yeah. And different people, truck drivers or, janitors and type stuff, they're in a different world anyway, because of their kind of work that they do.
Right.
But yeah, for a lot of people, 10 minutes is, that's all they want. They want to move on to something else or, do something else. So, but yeah, he just goes, no doubt.
Man. He lets it rip.
So, but anyway, that's our plan. So we'll put the word out there. BeyondCreationScience.com is where people can find the information. We are selling tickets now, and we do recommend to start thinking about that as a destination conference. We're here in Southwest Montana. We're close. We're an hour and a half away from Yellowstone National Park, one direction. And you'll need an extra day or 2 to do that because there's a lot of stuff to do at Yellowstone. And then we're about 4.5 hours, 5 hours from Glacier National Park, the other direction. And Glacier is the crown jewel of the national park system. And it's a long ways out there, but there is nothing in this world like Glacier National Park. We used to spend 1 to 2 weeks a year on a family vacation up there in that park. And we hiked and just explored, and just the most amazing scenic place to be. So those are all options. If you come out here, you might as well.
Yeah. Hey, I had one question before we move on.
Okay.
To buy tickets, do they go to your website, or is that in a different location?
So on the website, we have a link to Eventbrite.
There you go. Okay.
All the purchasing of tickets. I mean, we have an option there to contact someone directly for tickets, which is possible. But Eventbrite is carrying all of the sales of the tickets right online. And so go to our website, on the conference page, there's the link directly to Eventbrite.
Perfect.
So, but anyway, I was going to talk to you about, congregational life and get more about your story as far as how you came into preterism, and I know you have some pastoral background as far as ministry work with the congregation, and we chose our speakers. Five of our speakers out of 6 either are pastors now or involved in pastoral or congregational ministry, or have that in their background. And that went into some of the thinking behind choosing those speakers, because we think that is very important in like living out our congregational experience in the kingdom of God. And that's really hard for preterists, because we get kicked out a lot. But tell me your background in the pastoral stuff, and let's talk about congregational life with preterism for a bit.
So I guess if I had to start with pastoral life, so there was a little Reformed church here in town, probably, I don't know, at one time ran 150, 130 on a Sunday, something like that. And we became members of this church, and just real quick, I became really good friends with the pastor and then the youth pastor. And this kind of snowballed, these relationships. And I'd shared with the guys that I'd had a desire to preach and teach and these things. And so, and there's a lot more to the story. I'm going to spare the dates. I actually shared some of this in my testimony at the Berean conference last year. So if
I remember that as well.
If anybody wants to hear my boring story, you can go back and listen to that. But essentially, this church moved to being elder-led, and then they brought me on as one of the elders or pastors, synonymous terms. But so that was my first kind of taste of ministry, I guess. And I still work full-time. Like, this wasn't a paid gig, bivocational, unpaid pastor. And I think there were 4 of us total.
Right.
And I was also the music director during this time too. Now, we're at this church when my friend Zach Davis, decided, hey, we've gone through the whole Calvinism, Arminianism thing. Like, let's tackle something else. Hey, I got an idea. Let's study eschatology. We know other views exist, but all we've ever heard is left behind, dispensational, all that jazz. And so here we go down the track, you could say. And we just went from, dispensational into, I don't even think we went historic premill. I think we skipped that and went straight to amill. And we were there for all of 35 minutes and then realized that wasn't going to work. So then we moved over into postmillennialism. And we were like chest beating post mills, you know what I mean? For probably,
I was too.
2 or so years. I mean, like, my bookshelf over here still, I've probably got, I don't want to lie to you, probably 30 Doug Wilson books over here. You know what I mean? Like, we were ate up with it. And like all good things, Tim, you just keep studying, keep learning, and then you find holes.
Right.
And so, the big one for me was the coming thing. I didn't understand how we could say he came in 70, but that wasn't the second coming, right? And so you begin to try to unravel this stuff. And of course, where that landed us. I remember Zach calling me one day, so, man, I don't know how to say this, but I think the second coming already happened. And I hung up and threw my phone and, I'm just kidding. But anyway, fast forward, and obviously we land in the preterist world. Now, here's the funny part. While we're studying, myself and my friend Jordan Long and my friend Josh Gibson, we planted a church ourselves on the south end of Jonesboro. So we had a small group that met at Jordan's house, and the small group just grew organically over, I don't even know how long we met, like a year and a half, 2 years. And so, again, sparing a really long story, a lot of details, we planted this church, New Heritage Church, and we were there like 2 months when we all decided, we're 2 feet in, we can't argue this anymore. We're full preterists. And so then, you want to talk about pastoral ministry, then we're all sitting in front of each other going, boys, what do we do? We just brought, and it wasn't huge. I mean, we had 25 or so people with us, but how do we navigate this? And so essentially what we did is said, look, we got to tell them, like, we just have to sit our people down, tell them, here's what we believe, and here's how we got here. And so we started having meetings with everybody. And what we would do is just open to Matthew 24, and we would go backwards and forwards from there, right? Here's this and that, and why we believe what we believe. And would you believe that by the grace of God, not a single person left?
Wow.
Not a single one. As a matter of fact, they were saying stuff like, why is nobody else teaching this? Like, this makes more sense than anything I've ever been told. And so anyway, to fast forward a little more, we rocked on for about a year and then decided to basically just link arms with Zach. And so we moved our congregation down the road to Mark Tree with him. So now I'm part of First Baptist Mark Tree. I'm not a pastor. I'm in no leadership position. I'm a layman over there.
Right.
So
that's an interesting story that brings back a lot of my memories too, because I have a lot of similarity. I was always, bivocational in the sense that earning money for my family and businesses and the farm work that I do was always something that I wanted to keep going, because I didn't really want to be under like the situation where if you lose your job as a pastor, you've got a family to provide for. Well, that can set you up for, some real hard decisions. Your priorities are, and taking care of your family and, coming to conclusions. But so I had a lot of freedom in that situation. I was involved in congregational ministry for about 18 years here in Montana. Oh, wow. And the same kind of situation, 3 elders. There was no formal pastor. There was no full-time pastor, because it's a small country church. We might've had, at the peak, we might've had 30 to 40 people come in, just a few families. It's a small cowboy country, type of church with a, Whitehall might have 2,000 people for the whole town. So small town thing. And same kind of thing. We just we just loved each other. And, we had some disagreements that manifested at the end, but it was a great experience for me personally.
Yeah. And, and that's something that I've talked with Zach about too, is during that time, when we were at New Heritage, part of being a little tiny church like that's everybody has to be involved. Right. Everybody's doing something. I don't care if you're teaching kids or sweeping the floor, straightening the chairs. Like, it takes all of us to run the machine, so to speak. Right. And I think a part of that is not only a sense of community, right? A common, maybe more of a buy-in, you could say, than in a just traditional church, but there's a closeness that came with that too. Right. And in that year or so we were there, I felt like, man, those people, like, we were tight, you know what I mean? And it was just a really special time. And that's not to say that people aren't involved in our current church or any other church, not to say you don't love them. I'm not saying any of those things, but I'm saying there was a specialness there that I think was probably largely, and part of us leading up to it too, that we had spent years together already. Right. But just the tight smallness of it, really.
Yeah, this congregation actually started as a house church here in Montana. So it was like one guy had, family, extended family started, and then more people came. It was like Bible study. And it just, got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're like, we kind of need to do something a little bit more formal. So we kind of formally established in 2000, and then we, I was there until 2018. So 18 years. It was amazing.
Well, I've listened to a lot of your Daniel stuff that you've uploaded from back then and really enjoyed it. I said, man, this Tim guy could preach.
Well, I praise God that it's helpful to other people. And I'm trying to get some more sermons right now myself, trying to add more content there on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so, I've been uploading my Luke, because I preached pretty much through Luke while we were there, and I've been uploading those every Sunday. And I listen to them now, and I'm like, I didn't get that right. You know what I mean? Or I messed that up.
That's always the case. I think if you talk to anybody that teaches or preaches, you get that. Oh, I learned something brand new. Sometimes it's like the next week too. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I wish
you're
I
right.
had that a week ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting how that works. And well, let me ask you this, because in our congregation, we weren't all united about preterism. So we were a little different situation. There was a lot of heavy post-millennialism. There was a lot of heavy Reformed theology, confessional type stuff.
Yeah.
There were also a lot of homeschoolers. So we had like kind of a homeschooling community atmosphere that kind of bound us together. So, when you're in the homeschool community, every family has different ideas about priorities and what they're trying to accomplish with education. So we were able to kind of co-opt that and come together on those things. But with preterism, we did notice that people would move to the community and they'd be, checking out the churches and stuff, and they would come to ours and they would really enjoy the fellowship. But then the preaching, after like 2 or 3 weeks, they would start to figure out that, whether it be Reformed theology or whether it be post-millennialism or whether it be full preterism, depending on which elder was speaking,
Right.
they decided, and we had a number of people that said, we love this congregation as far as the personal relationships and the things you guys are doing, but we can't stay here because of what you guys are teaching. And they move on down the road.
Yep.
Which is fine. That's the way it is. But how do you think preterist theology sort of like incarnates into congregational life? I mean, how do you see this theology kind of working its way out? Because I've got some ideas, but I'd like to have your ideas.
Well, as far as the way that it's received, I think there's a lot to that, and it isn't just preterism. It's really any measure of an attempt at doctrinal depth, I think, because by and large, that's not what your everyday Christian even wants.
I agree. They asked about programs. What are you going to do with our kids? Youth group and all that stuff. And we didn't have a lot of that stuff because that just wasn't our focus. So as soon as they found out, they just move on down the road.
That's right. And I could get on a big rant about consumerism and so forth. And I think that's what drives that. But regardless, where I'm going with this is that does obviously affect the reception anyway, because by and large, you're fishing out of a smaller pond, so to speak.
Right.
But as far as the way that, our congregation is not, we wouldn't say we're a preterist church.
Right.
I don't think Zach would have a problem with me saying that. Are there preterists in there? Yes. Right. His Sunday school class, which probably, I don't know, I might goof this up. I think there's probably around 50, 60 people in there, like when everybody's showing up. Most of them, I would think, would probably say we're preterists, but there's a whole other half of the church that, quite frankly, either don't know or could care less or hold a different view. And we're okay with that. We're not saying you have to believe this to be here. That's not the goal. But as far as I think the question you're asking is how does the preterism tangibly work itself out in real life, and in the church life? And to me, I guess maybe I never lost that post-millennial flair. But part of the attraction of the post-millennial theology is the do something, right? Because your understanding is, hey, we're going to win. Like, this is a sure thing. And so that's kind of you're way more apt to go fight Muhammad Ali if you know you're going to win going out there, right? And so you carry that mentality into the world, and it's like, man, let's do something. Let's save some babies. Let's go out here and fight the good fight and give to all the stuff. And even though I'm not a post-millennial anymore, I think I still hold a lot of that, but I think that's okay within preterism. And it's not for the fact of we have this sure victory that we're marching toward, but rather we have a victory we're marching from, right? And since now we're in the fullness of salvation in the new heavens, new earth, and whatever terms you want to use, we have the fullness of that in Christ. We're perfectly reconciled with God. Why don't we go be effective in this world and show others that? And that's kind of my mentality. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, let's start with American. The Americanism is a problem. I mean, people have this idea of a church as being like, run it like a business, right? So I've heard people will, have conversations with pastor, and I've had meetings with pastor groups and stuff like that. And it's like, well, what do you do? Well, I run a church, it's like, okay, well, yeah, so do I. So listen, how do you run your church? I've heard that, it's like, as soon as I hear something like that, it's like the whole concept is like
On the first questions, how many people come? You know, how many are y'all running? That's what everybody wants to know.
How big is your church?
How big is your church? Yep.
And I laugh at that, but that, that's the way people think about it. And when you look at relationship based type of ministry, it's so foreign to biblical ideas. So there's that issue that, of course, we got to get off the front thing. But a lot of critics of preterism say, well, full preterists, they just stop going to church and they just don't do anything. And I see that in the community, and I understand why that is, because they've been hurt or they've been kicked out so many times. It's like they put their heart in something, and somebody says, "Well, you're a heretic. You're not welcome here, or you're not allowed to open your mouth. You can come here if you want, but don't open your mouth."
Yep.
And that's hard for a lot of people, and I totally understand that. But I see preterism as like highlighting relationship, because that's the theology is about covenant relationship with God that manifests to everything and everyone around us. So I kind of see congregational development as being like the most natural application of preterist theology in a local situation that people are living together in harmony and common mind, and just wanting to manifest the fruits of the gospel and all the different things that they're doing, not necessarily like agenda things, but just life, right? Just sit down and enjoy the gospel with people who you love, who have similar ideas and similar priorities, and just enjoy one another in that gospel life. That's how I see congregational life really working out from the preterist theology. And we can go into further things than that, but let's start there.
No, I agree with what you're saying 100%. So something that I've talked about, and I don't know where you land on this, but, I think it's Ephesians 4, where he says, and he gave apostles and prophets and pastors, and, and those things were given until the parousia, right? And so the conversation has been, in light of that, can we justify the office of pastor anymore? And what does that do for our entire paradigm of how we do church? And then the question becomes, are we supposed to do this? But in my mind, the question is, why wouldn't you want to? It's so sweet to me to gather with like-minded people, to sing, to pray, to sit under the word, and maybe that's not the way we're commanded per se to do it, but is there anything wrong with that?
See, that's where I think we can go really deep with preterist theology, and we have a lot of options on the table that we should start talking about and thinking about, because I agree with you that there is an eschatological context to those offices. And I really think that that's important to understand, because you get yourself into a formalism or a hierarchical mindset that is contrary to preterist ideas. All right, that gets to be a problem. But from my view, the idea of fulfillment and maturity in Christ gives us a lot of freedom to reorganize congregational in the most functional way as possible for our settings. In other words, I think that there's this old covenant structure that was very rigid for specific purposes in a shadow and type way, right? So you're presenting who God is. You're presenting an order that you follow because God manifested, himself through that system. But with fulfillment, right, we now have the reality to which those things pointed. And so we don't really have a formalism in a biblical sense, because obviously you don't really want to necessarily recreate the last days church when you're not living in the last days.
Right.
So that people have this idea, we just need to be a New Testament church. It's like, I hope not.
You mean you don't want to?
That does not sound appealing to me.
You don't want to go back under the law?
I don't want to go through the Great Tribulation, man. I enjoy the benefits of that, and
Amen.
Praise God for that. That was.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that you just completely reject the regulative principle of worship.
Yeah, that's a long conversation in
That's a joke.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think a lot of Reformed doctrine comes from mistakenly applying wrong contexts.
I agree. And I think that from a guy who was a chest beating postmillennial diehard Calvinist 3 years ago. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the truth.
And I'm not throwing things out, because I think you need to understand where they come from historically and why that they were put there. I do have a very high view. This is the craziest thing. People look at my work. I have a
Tim Martin's going to say something crazy, people. I'm ready to hear.
I have an extraordinarily high view of historical development and the fact that of organic development of doctrine and practice. Okay. I do. I think we need to know the old ways, and we need to know the old confessions, and we need to know different streams of thought in Christian theology. But I also think that we have a whole new context to examine all this stuff in, and that changes things. I mean,
it's scary.
it's very, very, it's very. It creates insecurity, and people want to grab things on really tight as a result, because that makes them feel secure. It's like that toddler that has a binky, that security blanket is like, no, you can't take that away.
My secure little trash.
Right. So I think the preterist theology has more freedom than we have really explored to be mature in the new covenant, to understand Christ's maturity in us, and apply the gospel in creative and like contextual ways. And there may be some of that with like the seeker sensitive movement was kind of like pushing that idea, but they didn't have the theology to like contain it. It was just all over the place.
So you're saying that there's a sense in which, I think if I'm understanding you right, that over time, whether you want to blame the papacy or the Puritans or whoever, somehow the church basically put itself in a cell. We've boxed ourselves in, right? That we've locked ourselves away under bondage, so to speak. But you're saying the doors have been open the whole time, and we're just now reaching a point where we're starting to walk out of that cell and figure this out.
My view is that the maturity, the reality of the new covenant life we have in Christ is more about freedom to grow in maturity than we have ever thought possible. Yeah, and that's my view of it. And that means you got to keep the good ideas too, right? Like you talk about like meeting with friends. We know that that's human reality. We live in a society like that. We live in, different relationships with institutions all the time. Institutions aren't the problem. It's when the institution becomes like the center of focus or the defining factor that it becomes really idolatrous at that level. So we don't have to have all this stuff if it's not functional in our setting. We're basically trying, a lot of conservative churches are like, well, if we just had like 1800s formal church Sunday best attendance and stuff, and then we could just be like that. That's the solution. And I don't believe that the solution is going backwards.
Right. You're saying there's a better way.
Yeah. And I think we're free to find that in our own context, because we all live in different contexts. You live in Arkansas, I live in Montana. It's a very different context. And then there's outside of the United States, right? So I think we're free to understand that context and apply wisdom in our own settings.
I think even in the quote unquote mainstream, if I can say that, Christianity, there is a move that's pushing in the direction you're talking about, and obviously not for the same reasons, but are you familiar with Michael Foster? He wrote It's Good to Be a Man, and he's done some other stuff.
I've heard the name. I've not really read anything by him that I.
Okay. He's an interesting cat, post-millennial guy, really good theologian. But he put a thing out probably a year or two ago, and he was just talking about the way that we do church.
Right.
And, it's full-time pastor model, congregation, whatever. And he was talking about, in essence, and I'm really, really shorthanding his entire discussion, but he was saying that society is not going to allow that model to be sustainable, because essentially things cost more and they're going to continue to cost more, but more money's not being pumped into the church to support the pastor. And so his point is people are going to have to get inventive and either be okay with bivocational or go back to house churches or figure out another way to do ministry.
Well, I think the internet and technology is playing in this as well, because it creates a whole new option and a new outlet and a new interaction that didn't exist like 30 years ago.
You're right. But I think what he's saying is accurate. And I think what you're saying runs right in tandem with what he's saying. And so maybe we're going to see that, develop over the next couple decades.
Well, that's interesting you point that out. And, I've read a lot of the Quakers, the old Quaker theology from American history with William Penn and Barclay and stuff. And that they're considered the opposite of the covenant reformed theology types, which is fine. But what amazes me is that they had this idea of the real presence in Quaker theology that really sounds a lot like full preterism.
Really?
Crazy. Yeah. And sometimes, they had the silent meetings, right? So they would just gather and sit in silence because they would wait until someone had something to say. And sometimes the whole meeting was just pure silence, which is an interesting way of doing congregational gatherings, which, meditation and stuff there's plenty of examples of that in scripture. But they had the idea of the real presence. It was why they didn't do communion. Because they looked at the ceremonial as like going backwards, and they didn't do water baptism and stuff. So this people think that, well, you preterists are talking about no more communion and stuff, or not doing that. That's a position that's like 400 years old.
Yeah.
In Quaker theology. And they had an idea that the real living presence was to be, the light. They call it the inner light. But from a full preterist perspective, there's some overlap there that is very interesting. And they had very, very flexible meetings too. I mean, they were the outcasts. They were persecuted. They left England because the established church wouldn't have them. And American history has got Quaker theology and from Pennsylvania on. So I think preterists should look into some bigger ideas of historical stuff that we don't talk about. They're there in history. So I think that's interesting study as well.
It really is. So you're saying these people were like the opposite of Pentecostals. I mean, they just come and sit and be quiet instead of getting all worked up,
A lot of people think of them as like the proto-Pentecostals because, the women were involved in a lot of the teaching and stuff too, which, that was like far liberal stuff back then. But the idea that they were really organized Quaker theology and their gatherings was the real presence. And they called it that, the real presence. And they got persecuted because they didn't believe in two sacraments. Because if you read the Quakers, they say, are there 7 sacraments? Talking about the Roman Catholics. Are there 2 sacraments? No. And they mock this. No, there are 70 times 70 because all life is sacramental because we have the real presence in us. Every time we eat in the presence of God. Every time we work. This is why the Quakers were so like industrious because, it was part of that Protestant work ethic, but it was from a Quaker view of real presence all the time. So they had some ideas there. That I think preterists could go back and look at, and they had some really bad ideas too. I'm not saying I'm Quaker.
Sure,
I am influenced by Quaker thought, but there's a problem. Our idea of penal institutions, of locking people up, to remediate them, that was a Quaker idea.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. It came from the Quakers, and it was more humane than debtors' prisons, right? And they had the idea if you put people in solitary confinement and give them meditation, they can be like remediated and released back to society. So it's all Quaker theology. Yeah, that's American history. But we don't know that stuff, and I wish preterists would read more widely on some of that stuff and historically for congregational life, because boy, they were right about some things. And we kind of have some Quaker ideas of anti-formalism in American theology, which has become kind of almost like its own formalism. Like, I'm formally anti-formal.
Right. Yeah.
Which you think about that for a while. It's like
the nonconformist conformist, right?
Yeah. it's almost like well, you become rigidly anti-formal. That's a new formalism.
Yeah.
Self-contradictory, but hey, people do that stuff. So but I think we should really blow the doors off of like discussion and brainstorming and thinking about the theology of preterism in terms of the new covenant, living in the holy city, living in New Jerusalem now, right?
Right.
Big implications. So that's my perspective.
Yep, I agree. And I think it's cool too. Like just you were talking about just looking at the past and these different views and the way that people did things. We have an advantage in our day, the age of information. You can click a couple of buttons, boom, you've got what John Calvin longed for, you know what I mean, just at your fingertips. And so our advantage is we can sit where we are today and see what they did right and see what they did wrong and build upon that. Right. And I think we see that even ongoing in real time now. You've got debates over a rapture or over resurrection views or over Genesis or, all these things. And we have the advantage of getting to watch both sides hash this thing out,
Right.
And I think it's great. I enjoy, seeing both sides of all this stuff. And
I get the impression that we are at a big turning point in at least the American church. And because so much is exported from America, it's exported around the world. Whatever happens right now, just the way God's providence has, the American-centric world, whatever happens here is going to get exported. I do feel we are at a transition period.
I agree.
And it's going to be big as far as whatever happens, and this dust settles. I think it's going to be big for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know if we should call it another Reformation or what, but I saw a Facebook post the other day. I think the guy's name was Darren Doan or something like that. But he was just talking about the theological landscape right now and how it's the Wild West. And there's just all this stuff in real time, and I thought that's really good. But when the dust settles, and I don't know if we'll be alive to see it or not, but, there's going to be some really solid foundation stuff out there.
Yeah, I think I saw that post on Facebook where he was talking about how the gatekeepers can't control anything anymore.
Right? Yeah, I shared it. I thought it was awesome.
I think I saw it from your sharing, actually, now that you think about it. And he was talking about there's nobody in charge to dictate, where this goes. It's really like the Wild West theologically. Yeah, I remember from your post on that, seeing that. That's a good analysis.
Well, I know that you and I have talked about this in the past, but I personally feel like we are on the very, very, we're the early church now. We're on the very, very early stages of this. And I don't know, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of stuff that's just not getting figured out in mine in your lifetime that's going to later, but we could be a part of it. We could do what we can and somebody could come along and build off of that. So,
well, it's amazing how history works like that. And I see providential, God orders change over time to bring his people back to faith.
Yep.
I think a lot of people get entrenched into a particular historical setting and they start relying on those things and wandering, right? And God, the good husband, knows how to shake things up, to bring his bride back to him into that covenant relationship. I kind of see all of history as that way. You know what being married is like, right? You're ups and downs. You have ups and downs and times when you're really close and times that you may disagree about some things. But I see that as that's like the ultimate paradigm for understanding history. Because God is using all of the providential aspects of life to have a world that challenges us at the appropriate times as God's people. I see that as healthy. Some people think, well, if we just get rid of all the unbelievers and everybody gets Christian, that's what God really wants. And I'm not sure I look at that anymore that way,
Well, I can't, because I know my own sinfulness, even as a believer. So if you think converting everybody is going to fix all the sin, I got news for you. That's not the way it works.
Well, this is a fascinating topic, and I just wanted to talk to you about it because we have congregational background, And we have this issue with preterists getting kicked out of churches and that whole animosity that goes on there. So
Yeah,
I don't hear a lot of people talking about this issue, and I think that we can.
Well, I'm not I'm not exempt either. I haven't been kicked out of my church, but I've been uninvited from 2 speaking arrangements. There is a Christian homeschool co-op here in Jonesboro that a year or 2 ago, I can't remember, but I sat down with 3 guys on the board and for an hour and some change answered questions. And I don't mean this arrogantly, but took them to task. Okay. Right. Couldn't answer anything, couldn't refute anything. And we got blackballed from that homeschool co-op nonetheless. So it's affecting my children. It's affecting me. So, to the people watching this that feel like you're on an island or, it sucks that you've been mistreated. It does, but you're not alone. We're all in this together. But I don't think God's called us to sit in a squishy, comfy chair all of our lives, Right. Who cares if somebody hates me for standing firm in my faith?
Right.
I would rather please God than please man, so to speak. So
I respect that. I think a lot of people would resonate with that, and it's going to encourage them. So thank you for saying that. But, thanks a lot for coming on, Travis. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. And I wish we'd have more conversations about this kind of practical stuff. And I know the theology is important, but this is really helpful. I appreciate you coming on and the time that you've given to us today.
Tim, that was the fastest hour of my life. I have thoroughly
6 minutes. We better wrap it up. I think we were talking about maybe 30 or 45, so we're over. But
I told you we were talkers.
Yeah, apparently. So, well, Travis, maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming. For everybody else, this is Tim Martin on Covenant Creation on YouTube with Travis Drum from First Baptist Church of Marked Tree, Arkansas, signing out for the evening.